Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be taking a look at Kingsfield 2, and it was developed and published by From Software and released in 1996, and it was only released on the PlayStation 1. Now all the way back at episode 15 I'd taken a look at Kingsfield 1, and I found it to be a pretty good game. Yeah, the controls were not perfect, but it was definitely not bad, but of course I mostly liked it because of the exploration. And like I explained in that episode, the first Kingsfield game is actually the second one, where the original one was never released outside of Japan, and Kingsfield 2 is known as Kingsfield 3 in Japan. So it's one of those strange origins like I mentioned in my Strange Origins feature. Now anyways, before we get into the story, I will like to say that this one is actually very similar, not only is it in the same style, then the same genre. So for a sequel, that seems pretty straightforward. So anyways, now let's move on to the story. So it takes place 15 years after the first game, and it begins with a storm going through the kingdom of Verdant, and the Moonlight Sword happens to go missing, which, as you know, the Moonlight Sword was one of the main things they had to go get in the first game. So you take control of a character named Lyle, who is the king's son. Now your character does not have a personality, so it's one of those games where you have to imagine yourself in his shoes. Just, you know, if your name happens to be Lyle, then that's perfect, but if not, well, like I said, you have to pretend to be Lyle. Now, unfortunately, the king has fell under corruption, so Lyle must find 4 of the greatest mages within the kingdom so he can get the king back to normal and, of course, get the Moonlight Sword. And that's all I have to say about the story. Now, it isn't anything mind-blowing, but it does work for what it is, and I don't have much issues whatsoever. So now, let's talk about the gameplay. So as I said before, it's a lot like the first game, where it's in a first-person view. You can equip many different weapons and armor pieces, and using magic is the same thing. And attacking works the exact same way, where you have a bar going underneath your health and your NP, and when you attack it goes down and then you gotta wait for it to go back up again. Well, you can attack again, but you won't do as much damage, so the way to do maximum damage is that you have to have your 2 bars all the way up. And you can find some random NPCs that you can buy and sell items off. And to save your game, you have to find a random crystal and save there. So it's a lot like the first game where you have to explore some mazes in a 3D environment. But this time around, I find this one feels a lot more open, mostly because there's a lot more wide open spaces, and there's a lot more towns and NPCs. And to explore newer areas, you have to go get some keys. But when you use up a key on a door, it's not gone for good, because you can actually take it back out again, but you won't be able to access it without putting the key back in. Because there are some doors that you'll open and they won't lead you to anywhere useful, so of course you can at least take the key back out and never have to go there again. My personal tip is just never sell any of the keys, because you never know when you're going to need them. Now for anyone that has seen my review on the first game, well, you know that I said that the game was very, very hard. Mainly because if you died in that game, you had to go all the way back at the beginning, and I mean that literally, like going back to level 1. And there's no continue screen or load screen or anything like that. So some people might get really confused and think, oh well, I have to start all the way back at level 1 and just grind all over again. So if you wanted to continue, you had to load from there, and it'll take you to wherever you last saved. Where in this game, if you die, it actually takes you all the way back at the beginning area, but you still keep your levels, your items, you actually keep everything. Which is a lot more forgiving, but that doesn't mean that this game is easy. This game is still pretty fucking tough, but not nearly as tough as the first game. But there is one thing in this game that does make it a bit harder than the first game, and that happens to be getting lost. Not only is this game really big, but there's also a lot of open, vast areas. So I do find myself getting lost in this game a bit easier than the first one, but of course getting lost in the first one was also a pretty big deal. But I have to say, I really do like the fact that everything is much more wide open though. So personally, I think that's a pretty big improvement that they wanted to make this one have a much more bigger map. So overall for the gameplay, it's a lot like the first game but just bigger and better. So for now, let's take a look at the controls. And the controls in this game are a lot like what I said in the first one. They're not really the greatest thing in the world. So when it comes to the button layout, everything else is actually very good. I mean, you can strafe with L and R, you can move with the D-pad. Yeah, this game doesn't have analog control. X is your action button, squares to attack, circles to open up your menu, and triangles for using your magic. And L2 and R2 look up and down. And if you hold X and move forward, you can actually sprint, but it does take down your little energy bar. So that part is all well and good, but as for the bad part, well, it is pretty slow at responding. And the walking can feel a little bit stiff. But I wouldn't say that it makes the game unplayable, it can just be a little bit more tougher than you think. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like it when the controls are this kind of slow. And as for me, I don't really like the slow controls either, but for this kind of game, I don't know why, but it kinda works in a weird way. The enemies move pretty slow as well, so it's not like they have a complete advantage over you. But the easiest tip I can give you for this is that try attacking them from the back and you don't have to worry about too much. So personally, I think the controls are more of a love it or hate it. But as for me, I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. But as for the hit detection though, and yeah, the hit detection was something that was in the first game, but it wasn't that bad, where here, yeah, it's not really a big improvement over it. But I do find that the hit detection in this game and the first game is definitely better than the hit detection within Shadow Tower, which is also from Software. From Software? Ugh, that's pretty funny. And I know I was pretty harsh on the game Shadow Tower, but I just felt that it just didn't feel as fun. Where this game, I find exploring everything and going into the different towns is just a lot of fun for me. So overall, the controls are not really a huge improvement, but I would still say that the game is playable, it just takes a lot of time to get used to. But as for me though, I'm pretty much used to it by now. But I can't say the same thing for other people, so like I already said, it's either a love it or hate it sort of thing. So now, let's take a look at the graphics, and all I have to say here is that I actually really like the graphics. Yes, it's very early 3D, and everything just looks kinda ugly and outdated and like doesn't age well. Now whenever I say things like it doesn't age well, I just feel like an asshole when I do. Because you really gotta think back to when this game first came out, because this was actually very damn impressive. And when this game was in development, this game was so ambitious that they weren't able to do everything that they wanted to do. But anyways, the reason why I like the graphics in this game is mostly because it's really dark and it suits the tone very well. Now yeah, there's a lot of draw distance, but it's not that annoying. At least you're actually able to see what's in front of you before you get attacked by it. And even if the NPCs don't have any faces, well, they do have some facial features like mustaches or eyebrows, so at least there is some kind of improvement going on. But I will have to say the monster designs are pretty cool. So overall, when it comes to the graphics, I actually like them myself, and you gotta remember, back when this game came out, it was actually pretty mind-blowing. So they're good for what they're trying to be. So now, as for the game's music, I really like the music a lot in this game, although I do kind of prefer the music in the first game, but this one is still pretty good. But I mostly like it for that it actually suits the game very well with its dark atmosphere. So I really don't have any complaints whatsoever about the music, and yeah, I actually do find that the music in the first game does kind of remind me of the music in Tecmo's Deception, which is actually pretty awesome. But then again, I'm a huge fan of that series, so that's to be expected. So yeah, music is definitely great. Now, if you want to buy this game usually costs about $25 to $35. So depending on the condition, I think that's actually not too bad. However, seeing it out in the wild is definitely something I don't see very often. I mean, I've only seen this game like twice before. The first time I've seen a copy of it, it was a bit too much what I was willing to pay for, but then the second time I've seen it, well, the copy wasn't complete, but it definitely was in pretty good shape, and that being the disc itself. But other than those two times, I've actually never seen this game, so maybe it might be my area where I don't see this game very often, but either way, it's definitely not a rare game, but I also wouldn't say it's a really common game either. So now, if I were to rate this game, I'd have to give it an 8 out of 10. Now, if you remember my rating for the first game, I gave it a 7, and I think this game is definitely a bigger improvement over the first one, so that's why I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, the controls are still weird to get used to, but I definitely think this game is definitely a lot more fun just to explore around and of course just kill some monsters. And I do find this game is a lot more easy to get into considering that it is much more forgiving. But like I said before, that doesn't mean that this game is easy because this game is still pretty damn tough. And that is what I really like, is when a game is tough but forgiving. A good example of this would have to be Ninja Gaiden, mainly because the game is insanely hard, or at least it gets insanely hard, but you do get unlimited continues. So that's why I prefer this one over the first game, but of course the first game is still a pretty good one. But I mostly like this one because of the big open areas. So that's all I have to say about Kingsfield 2, and yeah, I originally intended to want to combine all the Kingsfield games into one review, but at the time when I made the first one, I was not able to play through all the games or get a hold of them all. So that's why I did that one episode, and near the end of it I said something like how I'm going to take a look at one of the other games eventually. Well, yeah, it took me long enough to actually get there. So whenever I take a look at a Kingsfield related game, they're going to be pretty spread out. But I guess I should talk a little bit more about the series this time. So yes, other than the first 3 games, there is a fourth one, but over here it is called Kingsfield the Ancient City. Funny that they didn't even call it Kingsfield 3. But it is strange that this game in Europe is actually called Kingsfield 4. Now I find that to be very strange, so okay, here's the rundown. So the first game was only released in Japan, that's pretty straightforward. Then the second game, which got released in North America over here, is Kingsfield 1, and Europe also got Kingsfield 1. And then there's Kingsfield 3, which got redressed as Kingsfield 2 in North America, and then Europe never got that one apparently. So then when they make the fourth game, they actually called it number 4 in Europe when they didn't even get the other ones, except for the first one on PS1 that came out over here. Man, try to wrap your head around that. Maybe I should have explained that in the Strange Origins video, but oh well, whatever. Anyway, let's continue right along and talk about the next thing, which is actually a collector's edition of the first 3 games. And it happens to be called Kingsfield Dark Side Box, which actually comes with the first 3 games on PS1, and it actually comes with a whole bunch of other stuff, like it comes with some music, it comes with some books and manuals, all that good shit. And unfortunately, it was never released outside of Japan. But one thing I do find to be very interesting about this Dark Side box set is the fact that the release date came out in 2007. It's pretty interesting knowing that they reprinted 3 games on the PlayStation 1, and this was around when the PS3 first came out. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if more PS1 games actually got reprinted entirely in this day and age? I mean, the closest thing I can think about that happening in North America was when they brought the Metal Gear Solid Essential Collection, which comes with Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. And of course, Metal Gear Solid 1 being a PS1 game, they pretty much reprinted the first game entirely. I really wish they would do that more often because I thought that was pretty damn sweet. Anyways, time to get back on track with the Kingsfield series. They actually did make some spin-off games like Kingsfield Additional 1 and 2 on PSP. Only released in Japan, but it is worth noting mostly because the gameplay style is actually very different. Yeah, it looks like a dungeon crawler, but it's actually a grid-based dungeon crawler, kinda like the SMT game, so that's actually kinda interesting. And finally, the last thing that they'd done was Sword of the Moonlight Kingsfield Making Tool, which is for the computer. But to be more specific, it's for Windows. And as again, this game was only released in Japan, and that's a shame too, because what this game basically is that it's an edit tool where you can pretty much make your own Kingsfield game. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds fucking awesome. I really do wonder if there's a way you can play the game outside of Japan. It's pretty much like Mario Maker, but just, you know, Kingsfield Maker. So that wraps up the other games in the series, and yes, I will be taking a look at Kingsfield 4 next time, or, you know, the Ancient City, or whatever the hell you want to call it. But it probably won't happen for a little while, although this time I actually do own the game, so it'll happen whenever it does. So anyways, as for Kingsfield 2, I really enjoyed it a lot, so with that being said, thank you for watching and commenting.